Let's get some analysis then. We're joined by political analyst Khanyi Magubane. Always a pleasure to see you, Khanyi. A very good afternoon to you.
Hello, and your viewers.
Khanyi, I mean, time is certainly running out for parties to form coalitions. I mean, how will this all play out? Will we start to see political parties sort of succumbing to some sort of pressure and going into coalitions with parties that they vowed not to go into coalitions with? We're hearing them being quite steadfast on the issue that they're not going into coalitions with certain parties. We've just been hearing the IFP saying under no circumstances will they go into coalition with the ANC. I mean, we've been hearing the same thing from other political parties as well as to who they won't be talking to at all. But, you know, with time running out, what are the odds?
You know, Flo, you talk about time running out, and I think that the number of days that political parties have been given to negotiate coalitions is just too short. There's a lot of things that they need to consider. Number one, they need to consider their manifestos and their approach and what they've promised the public versus what their coalition partners are presenting on the table. You know, negotiations never just happen overnight. Even when we go into Lobola negotiations, they don't just happen over 1 or 2 days. It takes months. And I think that if they had been given at least a month to really work through their differences and find common ground, we wouldn't be in a position where parties are scrambling like they are right now to meet a deadline and at some point having to compromise their very core principles, something which EFF leader Julius Malema spoke to yesterday during the press conference, saying yes, they are willing to compromise even on issues like land redistribution without compensation. There were a number of issues that they were willing to compromise on, but they were not willing to compromise on their core principles as a party. And this has been the stance with many other political parties, but unfortunately such a stance doesn't work for coalitions. You know, something's got to give. It's a give and take. And if parties really want to get to a point where they either go into coalition with another party or relegate themselves to to opposition benches, then it will really depend on how much they are willing to yield. And unfortunately, Florence, right now, not all, but a majority of the hung municipalities are still sitting without a clear either coalition leadership or a party that has stood out and won a majority. And so this is a threat for reruns for elections in those hung municipalities, a situation or a scenario that we don't necessarily want to see. But if things continue the way that they are right now, we might get there.
And I mean, what happens then? I mean, you're talking about, parties needing to find some sort of common ground. What happens then if parties aren't able to form a coalition government, where they aren't able to find that common ground and aren't able to find each other at all? What then happens?
Well, then it's back to the ballots, Flo. It's back to the ballots. The constitutional law is very clear in terms of the Electoral Act, what needs to happen when there is no clear-cut winner or there is no coalition group that is leading the particular metro or council. Then we're going to see a scenario where those hung municipalities will have to hold elections again, something which is very expensive from a cost and logistical point of view for the IEC, but also for the country itself. I mean, the very reason why we are sitting in this position in the first place is because of low voter turnout. And if we had to go for a rerun of elections, I'm afraid we're going to have an even lesser amount of people going out to vote, because political parties are not going to be given an opportunity to campaign again like they did before the last elections. So with an even lower voter turnout, this is a direct threat to our democracy, Flo. It's a watershed moment, and I don't think political parties are treating it as seriously as they should.
Yeah. Ultimately, will the ANC sort of get its way? I mean, I'm looking at the fact that the Patriotic Alliance is saying, okay, well, we'll have to just go into a coalition with the ANC. And, you know, during the run-up to the local government elections, they were very clear about the fact that they won't be forming any sort of coalitions with the ANC. They had a lot of negative things to say, indeed, about the ANC and, how they aren't working in communities and now we're hearing a different, a change of view now, where they're saying that they will indeed then merge with the ANC, withdrawing from talks where the DA has said they are now weakened due to the Patriotic Alliance withdrawing from the negotiating table. Does it look as though ultimately the ANC will then, get its way? I'm hearing even the IFP again reiterating we won't talk to the ANC, but it might end up happening, won't it?
Well, that's the nature of politics. Politicians will say one thing and then they will do another depending on the offer that's on the table. Now, with a lot of political parties rejecting the ANC finds itself in a position where it will go to bed with whoever will take it. And what Gayton McKenzie is offering, the ANC right now is a possibility to hang on to Johannesburg. They're giving them that last glimmer of hope to have Johannesburg, as we've seen that talks have broken down with the EFF. We know that the EFF had generally put down a proposition that the ANC could take over Ekurhuleni, they take Tshwane, and Mashaba can have Johannesburg. But of course, we know that other opposition parties were not going to let the EFF just have their way without a fight. So it's really a case of how the mighty have fallen, because 5 to 10 years ago, the ANC would have never even looked in Gayton McKenzie's way, because he's such a young party, because he's in such niche communities, mainly the colored communities. But now they're in a position where Gayton McKenzie is a kingmaker and could actually be the one that offers them, that big metro that they want. And it has been a very presumptuous move by the ANC to be fighting for mayoral candidates without even having certainty that they are going to rule those certain metros or councils. It was a very premature move for them, but that's what has, for the most part, preoccupied their attention, positions, and power, which they are not even guaranteed at this stage.
I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned the Patriotic Alliance possibly being, a kingmaker. And, when I speak to different political analysts, they have different views. Just yesterday, one of the political analysts was of the view that, in fact, the FF Plus in this instance might be the kingmaker. So I'm interested for you to continue more on your thoughts in terms of the Patriotic Alliance being the kingmakers, and who else is perhaps in some sort of power seat at this time as those negotiations go on.
Florence, we can't just look at kingmaker in one sense. As we talk about different municipalities and metros, there'll be different kingmakers in every municipality. It will never be the same. You look at the Free State, for instance, you have the Ligwa Community Forum that actually ended up being a kingmaker when they went into a coalition with the DA, FF Plus, and other parties. The FF Plus, of course, we know has gone into partner, is discussing, the FF Plus with the DA, the COPE, Action SA, and ACDP. Together, they form the 108 seats needed to go into a coalition that will lead Tshwane. And we know that in Johannesburg, the Democratic Alliance is also scrambling to the smaller parties. So we can't just define a kingmaker as one political party, because it doesn't work across the spectrum. It's a case-by-case scenario. And we see that in the Eastern Cape, for instance, in Kabeja as well, where the ANC actually did very well. They today are having, some problems in terms of putting together all the smaller political parties that they need to have an outright majority. So it really is a scramble against time. I would say give the political parties at least a month. At least a month. In my view, I would say 2, but I don't think we have that enough time. But the amount of time that they've been given currently is way too short for such important decisions to be made.
All right, Khanyi, thank you very much for speaking to us here on SABC News. We certainly do appreciate your analysis as political analyst. Khanyi Magubane weighing in again on the issue of coalitions, as time certainly does run out for the parties to form those coalitions. Some saying that those coalition talks at municipalities would be set to be finalized this week as that deadline looms, but we're yet to see indeed anything concrete coming from the parties. At this time, we're just hearing parties talking about who they will and will not be working with, but nothing solid as yet. We'll certainly keep you updated.